We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph and Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 47a. On the previous Amud, Rabba said that Rav Huna said that if somebody buys something and he gives money to the seller, but he doesn't show the amount of money, he just says, I'm going to give you a certain amount of money, whatever's in my hand, and the seller pays no attention to what is in his hand. So then just by giving the money, that's going to be a kinyan, even though normally we say that most are not konos, money cannot create the kinyan, but here it can. And furthermore, v'yeshlo olav ona, furthermore, there is a claim of ona over here. Let's say the person would overpay or underpay. You do have claims of ona in such a situation. And the Gemara explains, Kana afa gav de lo mashach, there's a kinyan over here, even though there was no mashicha, there was no actual kinyan made, pulling of the actual object, de kaven de lo kapit, since the person didn't even care about how much money it was, so Kana, so that's a good kinyan. Techi chalipin dami, because what he's essentially doing is he's rendering it like a chalipin. It's like an exchange. He doesn't care about the money per se, he just wants to exchange the money for the object, and therefore it works like a kinyan chalipin. However, v'yeshlo olav ona, however, there is a claim of ona over here. Let's say the person would give an amount of money that wasn't enough, for example. The seller can then claim ona de macharli ba'elu kamarli, because he did say sell it to me with these, and therefore by using that language of sell it to me, it shows that it is considered to be a sale, and there would be a claim of ona. And Rashi explains, V'yeshlo l'chaveru olav din ona, his friend has a claim of ona, meaning emein b'mos kedei dmei hachefetz, let's say the amount of money was not actually what the object was worth, it wasn't enough money, shepichso shesus, he gave him less by a sixth, so then the seller can claim ona, but kachalipin dami, but it is considered to be like chalipin, well the kamei parach, now the Gemara later will ask, V'ain matbei nasa chalipin, you can't do a chalipin with coins, so how is it possible that this is a chalipin? And the Gemara continues with an alternate opinion. Rav Abba Amar Rav Huna. Rav Abba says that Rav Huna says, Mechor li be'elu, if a person says, sell me that object with this money, and again he doesn't count the amount of money, Kana, it is going to be a kinyan. However, ve'ein lo olav ona, however, there is no claim of ona, he can't claim that he was underpaid in such a situation. And the Gemara continues, Pshita, it is obvious, Domim ve'ein makbid alei, and let's say you have money, and the person is not concerned with how much money it is that he's selling the item for. Ha'kamrin and dekani, we said already that is a good kinyan, the chalip and damu, because that's considered to be like a chalip, and that's what we said previously. Chalipin u makbid alei and mai, but what if you have chalipin and the person is makbid? What's the halacha in such a situation? And Rashi explains, Pshita lon damim ve'in makbid alein means, Nasan lo mos o chayfetz b'shvil chayfetz, let's say he gives him money or an object for another object, b'shvil chayfetz acher for another object, b'toras damim again as a value, as money, v'lo hikbid alein, but he wasn't makbid, liros im yeshnan kedei shavin, to see if it's really worth that amount. Ha'amrinan dekani, below Mashiach, we said that's a good kinyan, you don't need to do Mashiach on the object. But chalipin u'makbid alein, what if you have a case of chalipin and he is makbid, meaning nasan lo chayfetz b'chayfetz, he gives one object for another object. B'toras chalipin liknos kedin kinyan shekon b'sur, he wants it to work like chalipin works as a kinyan. V'zeh makbid liro sheyasudar shava kolkach, but the person also wants to make sure that the scarf or whatever the object is actually is worth the same as the other object. So what's the halacha there? Mikanu tarvayu b'meshicha dechad minayu. Do we say that just by pulling one of them it creates the full kinyan on both objects? Oh, Dilmor, maybe hoel v'hikbid aleim, since he's makbid that the value should be a certain amount, harein kedamim, so now it takes on the properties of doing a kinyan with money. V'havilu mos, it's like money. Vein konos ad sheyimshoch gam hasheni, and so then the kinyan won't work until the second object also there's a meshicha that is done. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravada Barava says, Tashma, come in here, a proof from the following Brisa. Hareisha Yatofes Paraso, let's say a person is grabbing onto his cow, V'omeru bach haveiro, and he's standing there, his friend comes, V'yamarlo, he says to him, Paras cholama, what do you have this cow here for? And he says, L'chamor anitzarech, well, I really need a donkey, I'm hoping to exchange the cow for a donkey. Yesh li chamor shaninosen lach, so the other person says, I have a donkey I can give to you. Parascha bekama, so how much is your cow worth? Bekach v'kach, he says it's worth such and such. Chamorcha bekama, and how much is your donkey worth? Bekach v'kach, it's worth such and such. Mashach bal hachamor sapar, if the owner of the donkey pulls the cow, v'lo hispik bal hapar limshach es hachamor, but the person who owned the cow did not yet do the mashiach on the donkey, ad shameis hachamor, and then the donkey died, lo kana bal hachamor es hapar, so then the owner of the chamor did not acquire the para, meaning to say, you do need a mashiach on both objects, both animals, in this situation. And so the Gemara says, Shmami, no, we see from this, chalipin u'makbid alein, lo kana, that if you're doing a chalipin, but you're makbid on the value, that's not a good kinyan. And the Gemara responds, Amar Rava says, Atu chalipin b'shuftani askinan. Do you think we're talking about a chalipin with fools, the lo kapti, that they don't care about the value? Ela kol chalipin mikbad kapti. By all chalipin, the people who are doing the chalipin care about the value of the various items that are being exchanged. V'kanan, of course it's a kinyan. Even though they care about the value, that's going to be a good kinyan chalipin. V'hacha b'may askinan. And here in this brisa, what are we talking about? Why was it not a kinyan? The Amar le, because what he actually said to him was, Chamur b'para utzaleh. He was exchanging a donkey for a cow and a lamb. He pulled the cow, but he didn't do the meshicha on the lamb. So it wasn't a full meshicha. That's the real reason in the brisa why it wasn't a kinyan. But of course, by chalipin, even if they do care about the values, it is going to be a good kinyan chalipin, and this brisa is no proof against that. And the Gemara continues, Amar Mar, the master said, we said above, Mechorli ba'elu, if a person says, sell me that object with these coins, and again, the seller is not mak, but he doesn't care how many coins, so the halacha is kana, the halacha is just by giving over the coins, that creates the kinyan. V'yeshlo olav ona, but there is a claim of ona, let's say the buyer underpays, the seller does have a claim of ona. And the Gemara says, Leima savar Rav Huna matbeya nasa chalipin. Now let us say from this that Rav Huna holds that a coin can create a kinyan chalipin, because we're talking here about coins, and the idea was, since he wasn't makbid on the amount of coins, that worked as a kinyan chalipin. That seems to show that the matbeya can create a kinyan chalipin. And the Gemara says, Lo, no, Rav Huna savar like Reb Yochanan. Actually, Rav Huna holds like Reb Yochanan. Do Amar Dvar Torah Mos Konos. We said earlier that Reb Yochanan holds on a doraisa level, money really can create a kinyan. Umivnei ma amru mashicha konan. Why do they say that the money does not create a kinyan? Why did the Rabbanan say that instead you have to do a mashiach on the object? Because it's a gezeira. We're afraid the guy will say to him that your chitim, your wheat, it actually burned on the upper floor, meaning to say if the kinyan takes effect right when the seller takes the money and the buyer doesn't yet have the items, it's possible the buyer will lose out in this fashion that the seller will say, whatever I was selling to you, it's no longer around. And so in any case, what you see from Rabbi Yochanan is that on a doraisa level, money is able to be kona. And so therefore we say, milsa d'shchicha gazru barabanan. So if it's a kind of sale that's a common type of thing, so then the Rabbanan make that gezeira and they say that ma'os are not going to be a kinyan. However, milsa de lo shchicha, but if it's something that's not common, lo gazru barabanan, then the Rabbanan don't make a gezeira. This is not a common type of thing where a person is going to say, sell me this with these coins, and the seller's not going to care about the amount of coins since it's uncommon. Therefore, we're going to say in that situation that money is able to be kona. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Marhuna, Bereider of Nachman, Rav Ashi, Marhuna, the son of Rav Nachman, said to Rav Ashi, Atun hachi masnisula. You learn it like that, meaning that's how you derive. When we just said above, you derive that Rav Huna holds that matbeya does not create a chalipin, but anan hachi masninan la. But we learn it explicitly as follows: V'chein amar Rav Huna. Likewise, Rav Huna says, Ein matbeya nasa chalipin. That matbeya is not able to create a chalipin. And the Gemara continues by Mekkonen. The Gemara says, well, how do you create the kinyan chalipin? Rashi here explains the question by Mekkonen kinyan chalipin. How does the kinyan chalipin work? Techsib bekra, because it's written in the pasuk shalaf ish na'alu. It says again, you take off the shoe. Mi shalaf v'nasan. The point is, if you're making what we call a kinyan suda, really, so who's the one that's actually taking the item? The point over here is the person giving over the item, is he also giving over the sudar, or is it the person who's receiving the item that's giving over the sudar? That's the question over here when you do a kinyan sudar. And the Gemara says, Rav says, Bekalev shel kona. You actually use the kalim, you use the vessel of the person acquiring. The idea is that that person gives over whatever you're using to create the kinyan sudar, to create the kinyan chalipin. The nichole lakona de lahave makne kona, because it's good for the person acquiring that the person giving over should receive that item. Ki hechi de ligmar veliknele. That way he receives an item, and we know in exchange for that he's going to give over the other item properly. That's the opinion of Rav. The Levi Amar, but Levi says, Bekalev shel makna, that actually you use the vessels of the person giving over the main item. So let's say somebody's giving over, let's say, an animal, so the sudar will come from the person giving the animal, and that person will give the sudar to the person receiving the animal. And we'll explain the logic of that further on. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rav Huna midaskarta l'Rava. Rav Huna midaskarta said to Rava, Ula Levi d'Amar Bekalev shel makna. According to Levi, who says that you're using the vessels of the makna, the one giving over the item, hakakani ara agav glima. So what's happening over here then essentially is a person can acquire land through a glima, through like a cloak, through a garment. You're taking a movable object, giving it over one party to the other, and then through that kinyan you're also going to acquire land. But that's actually backwards. Imkain havalei nechasim sheyesh lan achrayis. achrayas. V'niknanim nechasim shein lam achrayas. It comes out that property with achrayas, which is land, is going to be acquired using a kinyan on property without achrayas, meaning using a kinyan that you're making on movable property. V'anon ibchatran, we learned exactly the opposite. We learned that nechasim shein lam achrayas, we learned in Meseches kedushin, that property with no achrayas, with no lien, meaning movable property, niknanim im nechasim sheyesh lam achrayas, that's acquired with the kinyan that you make on land. It's exactly the opposite. You make the kinyan on the land to acquire the movable objects, not vice versa. And so therefore that's just a general problem that we're asking over here according to Levi's opinion. And the Gemara continues, Amar Le, Rava said back to him, he have a Levi hach, if Levi was here, have a mapikli apach pulse denura, he would take out rods of fire in front of you, and he would give you lashes with those rods for this kind of a question, because misaver glima makna le, do you think that he's giving over to him the cloak, and then through that kinyan, he's also making a kinyan on the land? That's not what's happening. Rather, bahi hana, rather it's because of that benefit that he derives, to come a kablamine, that this other person is accepting from him the cloak. There's a certain amount of hana he gets from that, so that hana causes a subsequent kinyan. Gamar v'aknile, through that hana, he then is able to give over the land that he's giving over, and so therefore it's not that the kinyan on the cloak is the kinyan on the land. The kinyan on the cloak creates a certain hana, which through that hana he's makna the land. That's a different idea. And the Gemara continues, Ketanoi, let us say it's a machlokas tanoim. The pasuk in Rus says, V'zos lifnim b'Yisrael al hagula v'al atmur. This was the custom in Israel on the redemptions and the exchanges. L'kaim kol davar, to create these kinyonim. This pasuk is the source for the kinyan sudar. Shalaf ish na'olo v'nasan l'rei, where the person takes off his shoe and gives it to his friend, and that creates what we call kinyan sudar. Geula zu mechira, when it says geula, that refers to sales. V'chein hu omer lo yigol, it says that in the pasuk. And tamura zu chalip, and tamura refers to exchanges. V'chein hu omer lo yachlifenu v'lo yamiroso, pasuk says also, talks about yamiroso in the context of yachlifenu, of an exchange. L'kayim kol davar shalaf ish na'olo v'nasan l'rei, it says one party gives his shoe to the other party, so mi nasan l'mi, so who's the one that gave the shoe to whom? And so we have a machlokas tanoim here, exactly like the machlokas we had above. Boaz nasan l'goel, according to the Tanakama, Boaz gave the shoe to the Redeemer, and the goel is the one that then gave back the land, so it's the kona that's giving the sudar, or the shoe in this case. And Rabbi Yehuda says it's the other way around. Goel nasan l'Boaz, the goel is the one who gave it to Boaz, and he was the makna, the goel was the makna, so the makna is the one that is giving the sudar, or again, the shoe in this case. And Rashi explains, Geula zu mechira, again, the word Geula is a sale, Shemacher lo mechira gemura b'dam, meaning a regular sale with money. Velo kivel mos, but he didn't actually receive the money. Uvayin l'kayim divrei mechirasan al yidei kinyan. They want to finalize the sale through some kind of kinyan. And then zu chalip, and then we also have the concept of chalipin in the pasuk, Shemachlif klizeh b'chevetz shekenegdo. He's exchanging one vessel for another object. And so again, the question here, the machlokas tanoim here is the same as above. Who is the one that is giving the object? Is it the kona or the makna? And the Gemara continues, Tana was taught, Konin bechli afapisha ein bo shava pruta. You can make a kinyan chalipin with a vessel even though it's not worth a pruta. Amar of Nachman says, Lo shanu ela bechli. It's only true that you have kinyan chalipin if you're using a vessel. Avol bepiri lo, but produce, with produce you can't do a kinyan chalipin, meaning to say with anything that's not a vessel, you cannot do kinyan chalipin. Rav Sheisha Amar afilu bepeirus. Rav Sheisha says, no, even produce can be used for a kinyan chalipin. The Gemara says, my time of Rav Nachman, what's the reason of Rav Nachman? Amar Kratz, because the pasuk says Na'alo, Nal in Midiachrin Alo, it says a shoe. It's got to be like a shoe and nothing else. It has to be a vessel. My time of Rav Sheishas, and what's the reason of Rav Sheishas? Amar Kratz, because the pasuk says L'kayim kol davar, it says L'kayim kol davar, and as Rashi over here says, L'kayim kol davar, L'kayim b'chol davar, it means it can be done with anything according to Rav Sheishas. And the Gemara says, Rav Nachman nami hachsiv l'kayim kol davar. According to Rav Nachman also, isn't it written l'kayim kol davar? What does he do with that pasuk? And the Gemara answers, Ahu l'kayim kol davar de niknan b'minol. What that means to say is that all things, you can do this kind of a kinyan with a shoe. Rashi explains, Ahu l'kayim kol davar geula u'tmura b'minol, meaning you could do geula, a redemption, or as we said, a sale, or tamura, which refers to an exchange. All of those can be done with a minol. That's what the pasuk means when it says l'kayim kol davar. And the Gemara continues, Rav Sheishas nami, Rav Sheishas also, what is he going to do with Rav Nachman's pasuk? Hachsiv na'ala, doesn't it say shoe? If it says shoe, it has to be something like a shoe. It has to be like a kli. Amar lach Rav Sheishas says, no, what it means is as follows. Ma na'alo davar ha-mesuyim, just like a nal, a shoe is something that's mesuyim, specified. In this context, Rashi says, ha-mesuyim means sholim, it's something that is whole. Af kol davar ha-mesuyim, so too it has to be something that is whole. Liafuke, to exclude chatzi rimon v'chatzi egos delo, let's say it would be a half a pomegranate or half a nut, that would not be effective. It has to be a whole object to do a kinyan chalipin. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Sheshes Berei de Ravidi. Rav Sheshes, the son of Ravidi, says, Kiman kosvinon ha'idna. Like who do we write the following nowadays? Who are we following when we write as follows? Bimana de chasher lemikniya beit. It says bimana with a vessel that you can make a kinyan with. So it sounds like it needs to be a vessel. And so the Gemara says bimana lafuka mid Rav Sheshes. When it says bimana with a vessel, that's to exclude Rav Sheshes. The Amar Konan beperos, that he says you're able to make this kinyan with produce. That's not the case. Here we're saying bimana, it has to be a vessel. And then it says de kosher. It says that it has to be de kosher lemikniya beit. Something, a vessel that is good, that is kosher, in order to create this acquisition. That's la'afuke mi de Shmuel. That's to exclude Shmuel de Amr, because he says, Conan, that you're able to make this acquisition. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis.